Hello, everyone. So glad that you're here joining us. Welcome to this virtual program hosted by the Crime Victims Center of Chester County. My name is Grace, and I am a prevention education specialist at the Crime Victims Center. And I'm so excited to be here with you tonight.
My name is Olivia. I am also part of prevention education, but I am the volunteer and training coordinator here at CVC. And I'm also super jazzed to be talking about this today with you guys.
Yeah, so like I said, we are from the Crime Victims Center, which is Chester County's victim advocacy agency. We are located here in Westchester, but we serve all of Chester County. And so if you're interested in learning more about our services or about our prevention team, there will be some resources at the end for you to reach out to us. All right. Get everything you need, get comfortable, and we will go ahead and get started. So we don't have any beautiful smiling faces to ask this question in person, so we will just chit chat about it ourselves. But we want you to think about, what was your go-to self-care strategy during quarantine?
I'll start us off.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, I used to love reading when I was young, but as I got older, I felt like I had no time. And so because of COVID, a lot of things just kind of slowed down. So it was really nice to get back into a huge thing that I did was just reading again, which was so nice to be home and to be able to find the time to read. And it really helped me through, COVID, which was bananas. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually started reading again in COVID, well, during COVID as well, but I started reading fantasy stuff, which wasn't normally my thing. But I was needing a magical world where COVID did not exist. And so I hear you on the reading thing. I think my go-to strategy was probably going on walks, which was not my favorite thing, but it was the most beneficial self-care thing that I could do. Yes, because I was living with my mom, her and I would go out a lot, and she would be kind of my accountability partner in that. And so, yeah, getting outside, going for walks, that was my go-to strategy, even though it was not my favorite. Sometimes those are the ones that are the best for us. Awesome. So think to yourself, what was your go-to self-care strategy? Because I think a lot of us picked up some new ones that we hadn't done ever or in a while. So it's kind of nice to reflect on that. All right. So in today's program, we are going to be talking about community care. And so, of course, first we're going to explain what even is community care, why is it different from self-care, and then we're going to talk about why it's so important. Then we will chat a little bit about ways that you can incorporate community care into your own life and kind of give you some tools and frameworks of what that might look like if you want to bring it into your life. And then lastly, we have a fun little visioning exercise planned. So we'll have some questions and things for you to think through on your own, and we will chat through them on our own as well. Okay, so getting started, what even is community care, right? We started off by talking about self-care, which everybody knows and everyone has heard of that, but not everyone has heard of community care. I know that this is a relatively new term for me as well. So community care is basically just the idea of taking care of ourselves and one another in a collective and in a community. Okay, so this quote from Nikita Valerio, excuse me, she is a community organizer and researcher. And this quote says, "Community care is people committed to leveraging their privilege to be there for one another in various ways." Right, so this is just one of many ways of thinking about it. But as Nikita puts it, it's using what we have to offer to help other people in multiple different ways. And we'll talk about how caring for one another can look like a lot of different things. Some other things community care is simply showing up for each other, right? So not only showing up for yourself in self-care, but expanding that beyond. And that is why it's also collectivist. It is focused on a collective of people. And this is one of the really unique things about community care as opposed to self-care. Because community care asks us to think about the care of multiple people and think about how we are kind of all in this crazy wild ride of life together. And so we need to come together to make sure that each of us is being taken care of. And lastly, community care addresses the roots of stress or of things that might come up in our life that might make it so that we feel like we need to do a little bit of self-care. And so what community care asks of us is for us to think about the bigger structures that we might be able to change or that might be at play when it comes to why we are needing care. So for example, this might be a group of folks who exist in a marginalized or oppressed identity, or people in a certain socioeconomic status, thinking about ways that they can take care of each other and ways that other people can try and make sure that they're taking care of their community by changing the structures and the big roots of stress. Instead of just asking individuals to do it themselves, it kind of shows us a little bit deeper into where we might address the roots of these problems. Okay, so now I want to explain why community care and self-care are not against each other, but they are used together. So as we all know, self-care are things that we do for ourselves, just to take care of ourselves and to heighten our well-being. And so these might be things that people do for themselves to take care of their body, to take care of their health, to take strides to take care of their mental health. This might also just be doing stuff that you like after a particularly busy day or a stressful time. Self-care is kind of intentionally doing things for yourself to take care of yourself. And on the flip side, but in a similar way, community care are those things that we do for the well-being of ourselves, but also others. And it can also just be things that we do that contribute to our well-being that we do with other people, right? So sometimes self-care might be an isolating experience, something that we do alone. And community care asks us to bring other people in, and it focuses on the healing of many. And so the example that came to my mind when I was first thinking about, what is an example of community care that hits close to home when it comes to Chester County, or more specifically, Westchester, where we are located. It makes me think of something that many of you probably remember if you're familiar with the borough of Westchester. Charlie and Co. Barbershop started this thing where they put hearts in their window. And this was during a time when many businesses were closed. And I believe it was during a time when a lot of us were in stay-at-home orders. And so they started this as a way to show people that they were still here and that they still cared and were sharing love, even though we could not show up for each other in that physical in-person way. And they encouraged other people to do this as well. And these are just 4 pictures from a multitude of pictures and many more that you could have found that were never taken, or pictures were never taken of them. But this was a trend that caught on with businesses and restaurants and agencies like ours, and also just people's homes, putting hearts up in their windows and on their front doors, just as a sign of sharing love and sharing care with each other during a really tough time. And so this is an awesome example, right, of like using creativity, using art and things like little paper hearts to show multiple people coming together in a group to care about each other, right? Because putting hearts in your window could be self-care for one person and could make them feel awesome. But when it is an entire community of putting hearts in their windows and showing each other that they love and care for each other, that's when community care shows its power. Because even simply just seeing that can help heal people, can help people feel less alone, less isolated, and more a part of something larger. So this is an awesome example that I come back to when I think about what the difference is between self-care and community care.
Awesome. So yeah, next we're going to talk about something and that for me puts community care into a very intentional, concrete way of thinking about like collective care. And that's something called care webs or a care web. I just recently discovered this term of what it was from reading this book. It's called Care Work, and it's Dreaming of Disability Justice. It's an awesome book. Definitely recommend if you haven't read it. But before we get into like what it is and its definition and examples and all that, I just want to share this quote with you that I think encapsulates what a care web is really well. So sometimes we call them care webs or collectives. Sometimes we call them my friend that helps me out sometimes. Sometimes we don't call them anything at all. They're just life, just what you do. So what is a care web? A care web in layman's terms is a network of support, a network of resources, an exchange of goods and services and resources within a community. A lot of times it's not intentional, but they do exist in their life. And that's why we want to take this time to reflect and kind of like identify and be very intentional with the care webs that we hold in our lives already, or ones that we want to make. So here are some examples of care webs. That can look like interpersonal care webs. So your friends or your coworkers or, students in school you go to. That can look like a care web made of your family. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, DNA related. It can be your chosen family. And then finally, we have spiritual care webs. And that can look like, your local church, or if you're not, if you're more spiritual and less like an organized religion, just like connecting with the people within the whatever you connect with most spiritually. And yeah, care webs, I think one of the most like important parts of why it's important for community care is it doesn't always need to be an equal exchange of goods. The whole point is it exists for for people's needs. So that can look like someone who's maybe more financially stable can give money to someone else in their care web or in their community. And some people can give goods like food or services like their time. And sometimes you'll give to people in your community and you won't always receive. And that's okay in that moment. Sometimes the people you give to aren't always in a place to give back. And that's okay. And that's why you have a care web of people who can help you out if you need something, if another person can. So yeah, care webs are so important to community care and also going into the next question, how are they related to self-care? Like Grace said earlier, you can't have one without the other. They both exist and both rely on each other to exist. So a similarity could be, let's say you have the tendency of isolating and self-isolating when you're going through a rough time. And so a part of your self-care could be, reaching out to your care web and helping other people. And a part of you getting motivation and purpose and getting out of that rough patch can be helping others and, not self-isolating and being a part of that community and that care web and whatever that looks like. So it's related because with one, like you have the other just inherently or intentionally if something, specific happens. And differences, again, they're really connected, but, self-care is, like Grace said, the individual and care webs and community care are the collective, but again, it's like the same part. They both exist in the same space, even though they're like inherently different. So yeah, Grace, because we don't have any other victims on the call, how do you feel like these two are connected in your life?
Yeah, so this is a great question that I've had some time to think about, but I encourage you to think about it as well. Everyone who's watching, that is. But one example of how these two things are connected in my life is when I think about how I struggled with some seasons of pretty rough anxiety. And I have a lot of tools that I have to use myself when I feel those moments coming on. So I know to take some self-care, some time to myself to go through those tools that I have and use them. But another part of my self-care is making sure that I am taking care of my basic needs. And that is when my care web comes into play. Because, for example, I might have a hard time going grocery shopping. For some reason, it feels like a big task. It feels very daunting to me. But I know that in order to properly care for myself, I need to nourish my body. And so this is a moment when self-care for me turns to a collective. And I ask folks in my care web if anyone will be open to, let's say, go to the grocery store with me and help me shop. Right? Maybe that person drives me there. Maybe that person just sends me a lot of motivation and holds me accountable and asks me if I've gotten there yet. Or maybe they just come with me, right? Whatever that looks like. That is an example in my life when taking care of myself has to turn to other people because I just need help. And as Olivia said, the things that people have to offer look so different. Someone might be able to offer time, right? Coming with me. Someone might be able to offer driving me. Someone might just be able to offer me chatting on the phone for a bit to get my mind off of whatever is making me anxious. Someone also might be able to offer coming over and bringing me some food. There are a lot of different options to think about in this specific scenario. And so, yeah, that's an example from my life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Of
Yeah,
course.
I think it is so important to reiterate as well, like a care web can be a care person. You know, it doesn't always need to be like you can create your care web. So, you know, it can be as many people as you want it to be. And sometimes it looks like just your partner, or sometimes it looks like your immediate family, which could just be one parent or one person in your life who is has that parental role. So yeah, you can create whatever support that you need and feel is best in your life at that moment. So awesome.
Yeah, and care web is still something I'm working on. You know, I just gave an example, but I'm pretty sure mine might have 3 people in it. Um, right. And so it's always a growing thing. I also think about how sometimes care webs exist with people who are not in person with each other. It might be long distance friends. They also might be groups of people on the internet who support each other in small groups. And so, yeah, those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, definitely, especially with the age of COVID and like being online, like it's brought a lot of accessibility to like meeting people and seeing people and interacting with people from your home, but who live all over the world.
Mhm.
And so it's accessible in that way, which is awesome. Like you get to interact with people who you normally wouldn't, and that's really cool. Um, but yeah, so like I said before, like care webs can be a very intentional thing. So it's good, you know, to reflect and here are just some questions to ask yourself as you start your own or identify one that already exists in your life. So what is the goal of your care web? A lot of care webs can be started from a specific instance. So let's say someone in your life or your community either gets into an accident or is having a major surgery and they're no longer mobile, or they have like daily needs that need to be met that they personally can't meet for themselves. So, you know, the community will rise up, and whatever, you know, people within that community can give to that person to meet their needs, then they can. So the goal of that care web, then that specific care web would be getting resources, support, goods, everything to the person who is like sick or had just gotten into an accident, stuff like that. It's also good to identify who needs care and be very intentional with that. So in this moment, this person in your care web, in your community, needs your help. And so just be very intentional with, okay, this person in this moment needs it. That's a priority. Making sure they have food, and if they're not mobile, helping them do daily tasks, stuff like that. And that kind of goes into the next question, which is what kind of care. It's really good to be intentional and ask specifically, what kind of care do you need, and being very straightforward and not making them feel as though they have to, kind of like if they have mobility issues, not making them feel like they, embarrassed to be like, well, I need help getting from here to here. It's no worries. Like, what kind do you need? Like, very straightforward, that kind of stuff. So yeah, being very intentional with that's really important. Another good question to ask are, what are the best practices that allow the people receiving/giving care to receive/give care well? And I think the first part of that, and the most important part, is communication. And making sure that the person's needs are met, but then also the person giving care, can know what those needs are, and so that they can do it well. This looks like, always making sure that they feel comfortable expressing if the care that they're getting is actually helpful. Because I think a lot of people who are in that position, who like maybe gone from a place where they were very self-sustainable to a place where they had to rely on other people, are, afraid to ask simple things like, oh, you're bringing food over, awesome. I do want to let you know that I have this allergy, and or this, just being very vocal and communicative about your needs, even if you feel like you're being extra, or you're like, oh, I'm already getting help, I can't complain. It's like, no, you're still a person and you need help, and it's good to communicate your needs as little or as big as you feel like they are. And that plays into, you're getting and receiving this care well. It's on both ends, that it's something that's actually helpful. And then the next best practice that I think is also really important is just having grace and understanding that, sometimes these people who need your immediate care, if it's something very immediate and very sometimes temporary, that they could be in a lot of pain, and sometimes they're not in the best mood. And I think we have this idea in our culture, in this world, of you have to be a good person to receive care. And sometimes, especially if it's even a chronic illness or something, it's really hard to be in a really good mood all the time if you're constantly in pain, or if something very painful physically or mentally and emotionally happened to you. It's not even just a physical thing, it can be mental and emotional as well. And just having grace and understanding that those people deserve care as well, and it's just as important as providing physical care or whatever. It's but yeah, so just keeping all that in mind is, I think, the best way to, make sure that the relationship doesn't turn toxic, or, obviously set your own boundaries. People can be in pain and cannot be in the best mood, and that's okay. But it's also okay for you to set your own boundaries and your personal boundaries. Of, hey, listen, I'll help you in this, but this needs to be tweaked or whatever. Again, it is totally individual to your experience and what you're going through in the moment, but it's always important to remember those things. So what are some care webs that exist in your day-to-day life? One example that is a part of my life right now that's just been really recent, it's been really awesome. Within Westchester, there are a lot of small Facebook groups, and it's basically a care web of specific parts of Westchester, and it's on this Facebook group, and people can upload pictures of things they're trying to get rid of, and it's all free. It's just, hey, I don't want this anymore. Does anyone need this? And then people comment and they're like, that would be perfect. That's what I was looking for. And that way people save money, and people save resources, and people can even put on the page in search of XYZ. And so, yeah, that's that is a care web. Within the community of Westchester, it is an exchange of goods. And sometimes it's stuff as big as a TV, which is a bit more expensive, to as small as, a set of plates or something. And just because those are two different things monetary wise, it doesn't mean that you're still not giving something to someone who needs that thing. And but yeah, so I think that's really cool, and that it exists today, now, and in my life, and I feel blessed to have that. But yeah.
One that I think of in my life that I feel like many people might also have as well. It's kind of unintentional, but kind of like care webs at work. So that small group of coworkers who that you could go to if you needed help with something, whether it's inside of work or outside, right? Like if you've got something going on, you might have a small group of people like I do who I can go to if I need help with something. So that's another example of times when small care webs might come up. Um, but I also love that example of the Facebook group because what a good example of communities coming together. Okay. So for our last bit here, if you're watching from home, you're more than welcome to go through this activity on your own. It is meant to be a visioning exercise that can be artistic if you want it to be. But the point of it is to imagine what your ideal community might look like, right? And so a lot of times we have these dreams and these thoughts about what an awesome community that cares for each other might look like. And we can make those a reality, but first we just got to do the imagining. And so if you're at home following along, you can get out something to write with or draw with and a pen and paper. I have mine here, so I might go through it as well. But Olivia and I are just kind of going to kick back and forth these questions. And every person's answers are different, right? This is your own personal imagination. And it's meant for you to not hold back, right? Nothing is silly, nothing is too much. You want to dream of a world where you have unlimited resources. What might that community look like? Okay, so the first question is, what's the first thing that comes to your head that you want to see in your care web or in your group of community care? And I'm going to think about that and maybe draw something. And if you have any thoughts, Olivia, you can go ahead and share.
Yeah, I think right off the bat, it is like I've always had such a great group of like chosen family in my life. So really close friends that have become so close that they're family. And like right off the bat, like they are my support network, they are my resource network, they are my everything. So right off the bat, making sure that I have, or my ideal community, my ideal care web has those few people in it. And I just always feel so blessed to reflect. And in this moment, I'm like, like it's so cool that it's like the first thing that comes into my mind. And then I have those people and those support networks. So yeah, definitely close friends and my partner, and definitely in there.
I love that. The first thing that came to mind for me, not necessarily my interpersonal care web, but thinking more of what would my dream community of care look like if Westchester had very deep and strong community care? The first thing that I wrote down is that everyone would be welcome. Everyone would be able to access this stuff, right? So no matter what part of town people were from, no matter what their gender identity, their race, their ability, disability, whatever that may be, my dream would be for everyone to feel comfortable asking for help and giving help and receiving help. So I'm definitely seeing a diverse group of people in this care web.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Westchester is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next one is, what organizations do you see? And so, what other resources, what other organizations might you want to bring in? Who do you want to see helping uplift this community care?
Mm.
I think I might think about schools a lot, so that we can reach out to young people.
I think I see like small businesses who feel like, they can share whatever resources or whatever thing that they sell with the community, whether that ranges from like food of like from their background or like music. Like there's a really dope
Mm,
record store in town, like sharing like music is just like, oh, it's such a cool feeling.
I
Or like, yeah,
never thought
whatever,
about that.
whatever, like whatever that small business wanted to share with the community, or they love so much that they wanted to share with the community.
That's good. I also think about like local farms or like
Mm.
local, I guess, agriculture.
Yeah, there's apparently a really cool, like very small, like farmers market-esque thing in Westchester. Um, that's like zero waste, that kind of stuff.
Ooh,
Eco-friendly, very good food from like very local. So yeah, stuff like that. That's so cool.
so I got schools, books, libraries, music, local places. The next one is, what people do you see? I already mentioned that I see a pretty diverse range of people, and Olivia sees her core care web. Um, let's see, what other people do I want to see? Um,
I want to see like educators um, and like people coming in and sharing their perspective, kind of like what you said, very diverse. But people coming in to share their perspective and experiences so we could all grow as a collective. So like educator, not in the way of just like book stuff, but like, or book smarts. It's more just like learning about the experiences of other people and other cultures and other races and ethnicities and everything.
Storytellers.
Storytellers. That's really
That's
cool.
that's the word that I got when you were saying all that.
Mhm.
That's, the people with experiences sharing that. I also put like community organizers, people who already have the really awesome skill of bringing people together. Because some people are really great at that and other people have other stuff to offer, but I would love to see those people there as well. Maybe that's what they have to give to the community, is that they can get everyone together. Okay, and the last question to think about, what is a goal that you want to set for yourself when it comes to implementing community care into your life?
I think for me is, again, being very intentional with my care web. So like being more or utilizing, like, for example, like the Facebook group that I'm a part of more, making sure that like as much as I am taking, I am giving. So being very intentional in that way. To give back to something that's given me a lot. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think one of my goals is similar to yours, Olivia, but I just said like to have open eyes and to be curious about what opportunities there are for me to engage in community care. And like you said, to be more intentional, because sometimes we just do it randomly. But I think the more that we think about it as community care, the more we can do it more often. But yeah, I think keeping my eyes peeled, honestly, like even as I walk around town, what are some spaces or people or just things that you can notice? Sometimes I think I'm walking, I'm looking where I'm going, I'm thinking about the next thing to come, and I'm not being present in the moment. And I think that presence might offer more opportunities for me to notice ways that I can get involved. And so for me, it's kind of like an opening my eyes to see where those opportunities may lie. And even in my own relationships too, like when I can call onto my friends and be like, hey, I'm going to come and help you do this thing. And also, this is why, because it's collective care, it's community care, right? Sharing that with other people too. so they could put a name to it and do it more.
Yeah, I love that, like being more aware of your presence, because I remember I was driving right outside of Westchester and there was like a bunch of signs back to back that were like, you are loved, you matter, like, stuff like that. And I was like,
Mhm.
I've never noticed that before. And I passed it so often. And it was just like, that's such a small, not even small to some people. Like that is just, I feel like an easier way of like, if you can't give, you know, a lot of time, you can just simply say, you are loved, like you matter, on some
Yeah.
signs as people pass by. Like it doesn't even need to be this whole event or this whole thing. It can just be a
Mhm.
simple sign that says you matter and you are loved. And so it's so, like, you're so right, like being present and recognizing the small ways that people are already implementing community care in just like signs and the hearts in the windows. Like, yeah, it's
Mhm.
really cool.
Yeah. And then seeing that and be like, oh, cool. How can I get a sign? Right?
Yeah.
Like carrying it on is cool. Yeah. Those signs are awesome. I see them a lot um, in Downingtown and Westchester and Exton. So um, that's a great example of community care. All right, everyone. So hopefully you were able to get a little bit out of that visioning exercise. It could have been cool to do it in a bigger group because that is also an example of community care, right? Talking about our imaginations and our visions is self-care, and doing it with others is collective care, is community care. So sometimes it's as simple as journaling with other people or drawing in a group of other people. And so that's another example. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching this, for joining us. We both hope that you're doing well. If you want to reach out to us with any other questions or needs or thoughts, we are here for you. Both of our emails are up here as well as our social medias, but you can also find us online. We have a website. But we are here to help all different types of people in the county. And so you are more than welcome to reach out to us and learn more about that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.